Thank you, Jason. Well, it's just, am I on? Yes, I'm on. It's just a really delight to be here. I've been hearing about how sparsely settled this area is. It's a problem with local food. You know, we're spread out. There's nobody here. So I'm really glad that everybody who lives in the entire valley is here tonight. So it's really a joy to be with you. The kind of the topic that the powers that be, whoever they are, picked for me to deal with tonight was the topic that I enjoy so much, local food to the rescue. Now, when you say local food to the rescue, obviously you assume that something has to be rescued. And it begs the question, you mean, well, the supermarket's full of food and, you know, I've got beer in the refrigerator and, you know, nacho chips ready for the Super Bowl, you know, and life is good, right? I mean, what do we have to be rescued from? And so it's funny that you actually have to kind of back up a little bit and reiterate what we have to be rescued from. I mean, to me, intuitively, it just makes sense that I want to live next to my food. I mean, I don't understand why that's so foreign or repugnant to people, but to the economists, it is repugnant. You know, we need to have efficiencies to where the place that can produce the potatoes produces all the potatoes, and the place that produces the best carrots, they produce all the carrots. You know, and whether they come from Peru or India or whatever it is, and so. That's the common orthodoxy of our day. So I've got four kind of basic areas that I want to go through to kind of lay a case for what I think local food can save us from. Because I think probably, unless there's a Monsanto plant in here tonight, most of us are kind of on it, with it. But sometimes we need to be encouraged. You know, the choir needs to be hyped up a little bit too, inspired. So let's go through some of these. The first thing that I think the local food can save us from is a profound ignorance of our dependency on our ecological umbilical. You know, we live in a time with science fiction, Star Trek, and everything else where I'm convinced that many people actually believe that we can, you know, levitate into some cosmic nirvana and release our anchor, our mooring to this ecological umbilical. You know, we can go off and get a little pill for breakfast and a little, you know, plutonic radiated something for lunch, and you know, and we can break the bond of this, you know, sordid existence and some fantasy land of independence. I got news for you. Every single thing that we have, the wood on this stool, the paper in my notes, your chair, your clothing, unless it's completely polyethylene, I guess, or polyethylene. That's like a pipe, isn't it? Anyway. That's like I'm always sitting on croutons. No, it's futons, isn't it? Okay. So is that everything that we see is completely and utterly dependent on an invisible community of beings in the soil. And we don't even think about them. We don't. I mean, if you look through an electron microscope at a handful of soil, which of course, you know, has more beings than there are people on the face of the earth. I mean, that's a lot of beings in a handful of soil, right? And we look in an electron microscope, you're looking in that thing, you know, and here comes a four-legged, you know, kind of a cow-looking bloop, bloop thing, you know, salivating and, you know, kind of grazing on the marshy grasses, you know, around him, and he's kind of going about his business. And as you're watching this thing, all of a sudden in from 10 o'clock comes a narwhal thing with a spear on his head, six-legged, you know, and he comes running in and impales this aqueous bloop, bloop thing, you know, and, you know, and sucks out the juices, you know, and of course the aqueous thing is, you know, and before this bloop, bloop, you know, aqueous thing that's now desiccated, you know, from a narwhal, you know, can even fall over, here comes another like 12-legged thing running in, with scissors on his head. He looks like something out of a Steven Spielberg thing, and he comes in and he goes, whack, and scissors off the head of the bloop, eats it up. And I mean, all this happens in like 5 seconds. You're looking, wow, I mean, there's a lot of drama here, okay? And this is actually happening. Okay, and then beyond that, you've got this amazing underground nutrient cafe going on, where you've got these bacteria, negotiating with the plant, and the plant negotiating with the bacteria, and the bacteria says, "I'll bring you a molecule of zinc if you'll give me a bit of sugar," and so the plant, gets its zinc, and the bacteria gets its sugar, and there's this underground cafe going, and folks. All of this is happening, and it is what grows the fiber, the food, the everything that we do. It's this amazing invisible world that builds and controls. We are all completely dependent on this invisible world. Utterly dependent. And yet, how many times have you heard somebody walk into the bank for a business loan? We're going to start a business here. And so you walk into the bank, you give your business plan, and see, I'm from down south, so I can do this a little bit. And the banker, he sits back in his chair, well, now that's quite a business plan. In fact, this business is going to make so much money. I think I want to join you as your partner. We're going to be millionaires. But before I loan you the money for this business, I got one question for you. What is this going to do to the earthworms and the mycorrhizae in our community? Have you ever heard a banker ask that question? You see, we live, we shower in the morning and sing our songs and whatever and go, and we live our lives, and this completely invisible world upon which everything visible depends doesn't even exist in our frame of reference. And I'm suggesting that when we have this profound ignorance of our dependency on an ecological umbilical, because there's always 4-color cryovac packages at the supermarket, and it comes from Peru one week and Argentina the next week and Brazil the next week, and it's always there, we actually get this mentality that we can levitate above this local dependency. We don't have to worry about the weather. We don't have to think about, can they grow lettuce down there in the greenhouses today? We don't have to think about those kinds of things. We don't have to think about whether the earthworms are being good or not. We don't have to think about the carbon cycle. Are we in our community? Are we building soil? Are we sequestering carbon? How's the biomass doing today? Are we getting sunbeams today? We don't even think about that, because there's a profound kind of a disconnected pride in the luxury of not having to think about it. And you realize we're the first time in human history where nobody had to think about this. I mean, we are a product of our profound luxury and efficiency and techno-glitzy ability that we don't have to think about this. But when you think about, our great-great-grandparents, our generations that went before us, they had to think about all of these nuances of our ecological umbilical. Hydrology, the water cycle. Are we actually capturing raindrops, keeping them up as high as they can possibly be? The second thing that I think, so the local food system, I think, when we think locally, it changes our mentality to where we actually do start thinking locally, and we start thinking about the erosion in that lot. And the water, the muddy water in that creek, and because we start thinking about our nest, we start realizing, I'm dependent on this nest, and that's a powerful, profound. The second thing the local food, I think, can save us from is a profound disconnection with the food we eat. So I've been talking about soil in our ecological nest. Now I'm going to move up a little bit to the food that it produces. We have a profound disconnection from the food we eat. I mean, we as a culture now, we are far more interested and jazzed up and passionately informed about the latest dysfunction in the Kardashian household than we are what's going to become flesh of our flesh and bone of our bones at 6 o'clock. You know, it's not that we're not interested in things. We're just interested in stupid things. Yeah. And when we have this level of disconnection, what happens is that we lose the sense of this food, which is, of course, our body's fuel, this sense of compatibility with our internal community. I've been talking about the community in the soil, this invisible world. Well, there's also one inside of us. There's a huge community of 3 trillion members inside of us. And we're not asking them, what do you want? We're not asking them. And so what we're doing is we're going down and we're giving them unpronounceable food that won't rot. I mean, one of the coolest things I saw one time was a farm to school program in California. Went out there and these 2 ladies had this farm. And they were incorporated into the environment, into the science curriculum in the schools. And every 2 weeks, the kids would come out, for an afternoon on the farm. And one of the early assignments was they had this big worm bed, red wigglers, and it was about the size of a coffin. It was about 8 feet long and 2.5 feet wide and 3 feet deep. Had a lid on it, And of course, the kids got into the worms. I mean, kids get into worms, let me tell you. And so one of the assignments was, we'll bring food. And so the kids brought food, and they brought their Twizzlers and Wonder Bread and, Cheerios and Hot Pockets and whatever, right? And so they put them in this end of the box. And then the teachers, the farm ladies, they brought, an orange, an apple, a package of raw ground beef, some fresh sprouted quinoa bread, right? And they put it in over here. 2 weeks later, of course, the kids are all prepped for this, right? And they come out and they go charging up the hill. They open the lid, and out comes the Twizzlers, the Cheerios, the Wonder Bread, and all this stuff. Over here, they dig through and there's worms and they can't find anything. Well, what happened? Well, the obvious lesson was, well, why would you want to eat something that worms won't even eat? And that's a powerful lesson, right? That was just really cool, And we're the first civilization in history who routinely ingests things that won't rot. I mean, Velveeta cheese squeezed out of a bottle, it ain't right, folks. I mean, you put it on the table, you walk away from it for a year. It just sits there. It doesn't change, doesn't do anything. I mean, real cheese is supposed to grow molds and legs and walk off the table in 3 days. I'm kind of with Michael Pollan. He says we shouldn't eat anything that wasn't available before 1900. That's kind of the cutoff, Available before 1900 is okay. After, it's not. And we can all be thankful that hot dogs were 1990 World's Fair. Just squeaked right in there. 10 years to spare. And we're routinely eating food that you can't even make in your kitchen. I mean, if you've seen the documentary King Corn, and you watch them try to make high fructose corn syrup, you need a science lab to make this stuff. I mean, can you imagine trying to make, red dye 29 and any of the other unpronounceable chemical, long chain things? And all of these things are invasions to our internal community. They don't know what this stuff is. What is this stuff? They have no clue what it is. And so this lack of compatibility, when we have this disconnection with food, we don't ever have to think about food. We just thoughtlessly, mindlessly, go and consume. It puts us very out of touch with our internal community. I mean, if there's one thing about local food, it should be local to me, personalized local. right, to my 3 trillion member internal community. This disconnection creates vulnerabilities in the food system. One of the big vulnerabilities is simply the potential of scarcity. If I asked you, where is Ketchum's food? 100 years ago, Ketchum's food would have been in everybody's home larder. We don't even use the word anymore. Today, when I ask where is Ketchum's food, well, most of it is a couple days' journey at a Costco warehouse somewhere. Most of it is sitting on the dock in some foreign port waiting to get put on a ship to come to here. That is vulnerability. Average food travels 1,500 miles. That is subject to a lot of disruptions. What if the Teamsters strike? What if the longshoremen strike? What if a blizzard comes? What if the energy cuts off? And there's average of 3 days in the supermarket. 50% of all human edible food, this is the first time in human history that half of all human edible food has not been eaten because of spoilage, blemish, and people don't know how to use it. That is all part of this whole scarcity thing. Secure food systems are grown and stored on site within touching distance. I want you to think about the emotional, spiritual ramifications for going to bed with your beloved at night, knowing that you're 20 feet away from a larder of food. If you've ever been to Williamsburg, Virginia, my favorite from Williamsburg is not Williamsburg, but actually the Powhatan Village. And you go out there, and they got these cool houses. They built these saplings in like made little huts, and they covered them up with buffalo skins. And I think it's kind of cool to have a house that composts every 15 years. I mean, you think about it. A house that composts every 15 years allows you to do some pretty cool remodeling without the expense of remodeling. And in the lifestyle of a family, I mean, you get married, you need a little house. And then kids come along, you need a bigger house. 15 years later, kids are gone, now you need a little house again. So 15-year increments to have your house compost and have to do another one is pretty good for the life cycle of a family. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. But anyway, you go in there, and when you lie down and you look up into rafters up here, or little, there's sap. You see corn and fish and venison and squash and all this stuff, and to lie down at night with your beloved and gaze into the larder. Think about, okay, I didn't mean anything cheeky about that, but to be able to have that level of visceral connection, not only to the dependency on our nest, but secondly, to a visual representation that the earth is abundant and it wants to provide. And this is an object lesson of grace and sufficiency. Has profound spiritual ramifications. As opposed to, there's going to be a blizzard. Oh, we got to get to the supermarket, get some milk, get some, we got to grab up stuff, and you see on the news, then you'll see, the empty store shelves, everybody's watching, everybody's, what are we going to do? And we got a larder. When Teresa sends me shopping, she says, I need 3 cans of green beans, 2 cans of corn, 4 cans of, squash and applesauce. Take a box down, a 5-gallon bucket to the basement where we've got, 800 quarts of stuff, and I pick up the sauerkraut and the whatever, and shoot, I mean, we could live for a while. I think it's time to restore the larder and to put food back in proximity to us. Another vulnerability, of course, with this disconnection with our food system is the pathogenicity that comes with long-distance transportation, centralized storage, centralized production, centralized processing. Centralization lengthens the custody chain between farm and fork, and every time we lengthen that and try to do it on a grander scale, as if there's no limitation on scale, what happens is we have additional pathogenicity. You know, the Government Accounting Office released a report a couple of years ago with all these, food recalls and vulnerabilities. They released a report on what are the common Is there a trap door down here? They're getting ready to drop me into the... They did it. Well, if you can stand it, I can stand it. Okay. I'll come over here. All right. Maybe I'll come over here a little bit. All right. So the GAO was commissioned by Congress to do a study on vulnerability. It was for foodborne pathogen risk factors in the American food system. Okay? Now, what's amazing about this is they actually got it right. I mean, the government doesn't get very many things right, but they got this one right. And here, you ready for, there were 4 of them. They identified 4 of them. Here they are. You ready for them? Centralized production. Big factory farms, single species, whatever. Centralized processing. Great big abattoirs. Great big canneries. Great big, processing. Long distance transportation. And subtherapeutic drugs, pharmaceuticals. Now, you would think that if that was the consensus and that was the report, somebody up there would have had enough brains, enough sense, enough foresight, enough, whatever, to sit down and say, well, if those are the vulnerabilities, centralized production, centralized processing, long-distance transportation, subtherapeutic drugs, wouldn't you think that somebody there, a very far-reaching prophetic visionary, would have said, well, if those are the vulnerabilities, maybe we ought to create a food system that's the opposite of these. Is that something that we might want to do? Well, let's look at these. Let's see how difficult this is. Let's see if the collective brain power in this room is now this report was done 10 years ago, okay? 10 years ago. So let's see if we can think possibly of what the opposite of these vulnerabilities would be. Centralized production. What would be the opposite of centralized production? Small family farms. Okay, all right. Looks like we got that one solved. What about centralized processing? Yeah, something like cottage kitchens, home-centric cottage industry. Yeah. How about subtherapeutic drugs? Well, what would be the opposite? Animals and plants that have an immune system. Well, golly day, you mean we can actually have animals and plants that have an immune system? People that come to our farm, we have a 24/7, 365 open door policy at our farm. Anyone can come from anywhere in the world, anytime to see anything, anywhere, unannounced. Okay? That's our commitment to transparency. And a lot of these people, when people come from the they're looking around for the check-in station, the sheep dip, and a hazardous material suit and the sign in, looking for no trespassing. One of my favorite signs. I saw it in Australia. I went to this farm and it looked like a no trespassing sign, but instead of a no trespassing, it said trespassers will be impressed. I like that. Yeah, listen, if you got to walk through sheep dip and put on a hazmat suit to go visit your food, you might not want to eat it. But yeah, immunological enhancements. We say we don't need all that stuff because our stuff has an immune system. Amazing. What about now? This is going to be a really hard one. The fourth one is long distance transportation. What could possibly be opposite of that? Yeah, we're talking about local. Sure. Yeah, sure. Close proximity. Now here we just took this GAO report, and even in backwater Ketchum, Idaho, in 5 minutes, we were able to, I I wonder even if the Duck Dynasty guys could figure this out. I'll bet they even could. And here we figured this out. We are now a decade past this report, and we are still, as a country, as a civilization, as a policy system, we are still doing everything possible to increase the vulnerabilities. That's what's going on. So local food systems solve these things. You know, if I wanted to create pathogenicity in the food system, you know, I had some evil intent, some, you know, terrible black heart. I said, I want to have a pathogenic farm. Yeah. Well, think about what I would do. First of all, I would grow only one species. I mean, you know, we don't want to confuse the pathogens. We want to give them a host as much as possible, and we don't want to confuse them with some other species. You know, we're going to do one species. And then we're going to crowd that species up. We're going to put them real close together so the pathogens don't have to work real hard going from one host to another. They can get there real easily. And then we're going to confine these things without air and sunshine in factories, right? And crowd them in there. And then we're going to make sure they can't get any exercise. I mean, you know, who needs exercise? That's, you know, exercise is really healthful and good for wellness, so we don't want them to have any exercise. And we're going to give them artificial food and GMO food, and we're going to give them subtherapeutic drugs, override their immune system. All right, you see where I'm going. What have I just described? American agriculture, capitalism, he said. I've just described our system. But local farming is inherently different than all this, because local farming, because people see and it's proximate to customer and everything is closer, it inherently moves toward a place of aesthetic and aromatic sensual romance. What we're talking about here is re-embedding the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. You know, industrial farming divorced us from the ecological womb. And in fact, our whole civilization was on a tear for several decades, ripping up this anchor to all these dependencies that we've had. I mean, probably the most profound one was the dependency on breast milk for nursing infants. And here we went through 2 or 3 decades that said that's barbaric. That's like Neanderthal. You know, you want this, you know, infant formula. That's the thing to do. You know, who would have guessed in the 1950s that by the 1970s we would have La Leche League and Lamaze classes and, you know, and men that wanted to see it and be a part of it, and besides just the start of it, they wanted to help finish it too, you know. I mean, and I've always thought that from a resource standpoint, those decades of not using all those breasts has got to be the biggest waste of resources ever in the world. I mean, it's just. So what we're talking about here is integrating our food system in a local-centric way. All right, the third basic thing that local food saves us from is a profound pride in a non-integrated life system. Is that too heady? Profound pride in a non-integrated life system. You know, we go skiing, but not gardening. We board our horses, but we won't let farmers board interns. We join CSAs, but we won't can, freeze, pickle, lacto, ferment, dry, or otherwise preserve seasonal bounty. And we think localization is up to somebody else. Here are the manifestations of this kind of mentality. We give Greenie Awards for trucking biomass to industrial composting sites. You know, if a university starts a composting program and puts it on a diesel truck to go 10 miles out to the composting site, we give an award to the college for thinking green. That's not green. You know, green would be the college getting a flock of chickens and putting them right up against the dining services door so the kitchen scraps come out to the chickens lay eggs. Now they don't have to buy eggs from the industry. They don't have to go on a diesel truck. None of the food scraps go on a diesel truck. And the whole thing gets cycled in situ on site. That's green. You know, kitchen, thank you. I'm a big fan of kitchen chickens. And if you're just living in an apartment, yes, throw out the dog, the cat, the gerbil, and the cobra, and get yourself a couple of chickens. And if you've got teenagers, there is nothing that provides as great a role model for teenagers. Chickens are the first things up in the morning. They wake up bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. I mean, before the cows, before the pigs, you know, I mean, they are number one, all right? They get up bright in the morning, and they spend all day happily turning trash into treasure, you know, garbage into eggs. I mean, how good does it get, right? And then, guess what? As soon as the sun starts to go down, they go to bed. I mean, can you think of a better role model for teenagers? All of this, you know, it manifests itself in funny things. You know, we think that we can have exercise without doing anything, and you know, I'm a big believer in, and we have to participate in all this. Part of this, of course, is a resurgence of domestic culinary arts. Ultimately, you can't have an integrity food system without a high degree of participation from the population. Many, I'll be a very sexist here for many. All of our customers are women. I mean, men don't shop, they don't buy food. I mean, men they just open the refrigerator, look in, grunt, say, I can't find it, you know, close the door. That's all men do. So all of our customers are women. 40 years ago, did you know 40 years ago you couldn't go to the store and get a boneless, skinless breast chicken? If you want a boneless, skinless breast, you got a whole chicken. You took it home and you took, you know, a knife. Yeah, you know, one of those things, a knife and a cutting board, and you cut out the boneless breast. You put the rest of the chicken in the stock pot and made stock and soup and stuff out of it, or dumplings or whatever, and you took your breast and you cooked it up. Nobody asked us for boneless, skinless breast 40 years ago. I mean, you know, it was part of your DNA when you were born as a female to know how to cut up a chicken. I mean, that was part of your, you know, duties. Today, half of our customers don't even know that a chicken has bones. I mean, they think we go out and pick skinless, boneless breasts off the, you know, the skinless, boneless breast tree, you know, or something. I mean, no culture has ever spent more time and money techno-gadgetizing its kitchens and been more lost as to where it is, or how to use it, how to find it. Locals' food security ultimately is founded on domestic food participation and preparation. We can't, the heart of a local food system is home centricity. And if we don't have home-based culinary excitement, we don't have a local food system. Home becomes the center of life rather than a pit stop between everything else that's important. The final thing that a local food system saves us from is a dependency on the global corporate food agenda. I don't call it a conspiracy. You know, if you say something like conspiracy, then everybody, you know. It's not a conspiracy. I call it a fraternity of ideas. And the fraternity wants to control the food. And anybody here that's trying to, you know, to participate in that local food system, you're dealing with you know, inspectors and insurance companies and regulations and label requirements. I mean, there's a plethora of things that you have to do. I mean, and it's not just food. It's systemic. It's foundational systemic prejudice against innovators. I'll give you an example. So on our farm, we have a full-time delivery driver, Big Richard. Okay, and Big Richard's our delivery driver. Well, for workman's comp, we're registered as a farm. I mean, they got to put us in a box, right? What kind of business you're in, right? So we're a farm, okay? The only kind of delivery driver that a farm can have is a live animal hauler. You can't have a delivery driver that handles boxes of food if you're a farm. Now, when you're a live animal hauler, and of course we have to be registered, as a livestock or a grain. You can't be both livestock and horticulture. You've got to be one or the other. And so you understand that a live animal hauler, that's a risky business. I mean, a cow can kick you. Everybody that hauls animals all the time, they're all these, old guys that, kind of, hobble around, They've been kicked, beat up, and got, caught by a horse or a bull or something in there, and they're all crippled up and messed up. And so workman's comp has a very, very high exposure rate for a live animal hauler. Now, I have never seen a box of frozen T-bone steaks kick anybody. But our delivery driver has to go as a live animal hauler because we're a farm and farms don't handle boxes. So, and our apprentices and interns, we've got to put them in. Well, you can't have somebody that works in both poultry and beef. You have to have a poultry worker or a beef worker or a pork worker. You can't have somebody that does all these. The whole system is rigged to the industrial system, the single species, single deal. And of course, the exposure, so if we put them as a poultry worker, we have to pay whatever it is, $2 100 on the workman's comp. But beyond that, the exposure is based on being in a Tyson factory house with fecal particulate and gas masks and hazmat suits and fans and whirls and circuit breakers and dust and combustible everything and, chickens and augers and feed augers and all this stuff. Our poultry worker goes out in the field and says, "Hi, chickens, move your house for you." Sticks a little dolly under, moves them, puts some feed in there, throws a bucket of water. There's no fan, no electricity, no combustibles. I mean, there's not even any sawdust. I mean, and so the actuarials of exposure are completely skewed. And then you have your food safety. I mean, I think it's amazing in this country that we've now determined that it's perfectly safe to feed your kids Mountain Dew, Coca-Cola, and Twinkies. But compost-grown tomatoes and raw milk are hazardous substances. So we've come to this. It's not a conspiracy; it's a fraternity of ideas, and it's manifested by assuming that sterile is safe. Well, sterile isn't safe. We've got a bunch of unsterile things inside of us that are looking for unsterile stuff, and we've got this mentality that if we reduce some of these regulations, that's risky. You can't let people have food choice and go out here and shop in backyards and shop in homesteads and farmsteads and decide we couldn't do that. I mean, there's dirty farmers and there are. And there's dirty corporate and dirty industry and dirty politics and dirty fraternization between the regulators and the regulatees and concessionary, subsidiary kind of things that block out innovative upstarts like us. And so I think that one of the wonderful things that every time you shop in local food, it's like the ultimate little reclaiming citizenship kind of thing. Monsanto, you don't own me. Tyson, you don't own me. Okay? China, you don't own me. I think it's so cool when you shop locally that you're actually voting with your dollar. What's happened, though, is we've got so many food regulations that starting embryonically is difficult. Now, let me ask you something. Everybody here, I'm sure, is familiar with eBay. All right. Now, let me just ask you, can you imagine if in order to put an item on eBay, you had to get a license as a licensed eBay operator? And then you had to get the fire marshal to come out and check the fire extinguisher on the wall so when the hot bids come in, the fire extinguisher is ready to deal with that. And you have to get the electrical inspector to come in and check the cobweb of wires under your computer desk so that, you don't short circuit anything and blow up the computer. And you have to get an OSHA compliance license to show that all of your desks and everything are acceptable so that when you get that first big bid and you jump up, whoa, I got to look at this, you don't get a splinter in your hiney from the plywood makeshift desk behind you. Are you with me where I'm going with this? The question is, would we have eBay? No, we wouldn't have eBay. I can tell you right now that one of the, if not the fundamental thing holding back our local food system for all the ignorance and the convenience wanting and all the things in our culture, the number one reason that it's being held back as much as it is because of these asinine regulations that preclude embryonic entrepreneurs from launching at a backyard scale to do commerce with their neighbors. That's why it doesn't exist. Every day I talk to farmers from all over the country, and this is only a problem, of course, in developed countries. It's not a problem in developing countries. It's a problem in our sophisticated countries. And every day, farmers that are desperate to make some cheese, to make a quiche, to do something and access their local food system, and they're hampered by these kinds of regulations. So, the regulations are not about safety. They're ultimately about market access. When we have as much interest in our country to preserve food choice as we do gun choice, or marriage choice, or abortion choice, we'll have a different country. We're willing to march and sign petitions for all those choices. But when it comes to letting me as a producer and you as a customer, as consenting adults, engaging in voluntary transaction, we say, well, we've got to protect these people from choice because you might be a dirty farmer and we can't trust people to make this choice. Meanwhile, the industrial global fraternity continues to roll with much less competition than they would have if people like us were able to easily launch. We'd like to, the reason our bacon is $15 a pound is not because we like to gouge people on the price of bacon. It's because since we live in an agricultural zone, it's illegal for us to have a smoker because smoking meat is manufacturing and that's illegal in an agricultural zone. And we can't have economic interests integrated. We have to segregate economic interests. I can't legally go to the woods and cut a tree, mill it on my sawmill, make a chair, and sell it to you. I can cut the tree, mill it into lumber, but I can't make a chair for you because that is manufacturing. Woodworking is manufacturing, which is illegal in an agricultural zone. Okay? And so all of these heritage arts and crafts that form the local economy and the local farm economy, that people travel from all over the world to go ooh and ah over at Williamsburg when you walk out the back of any household in Williamsburg and see the candle maker and the spoke maker and the blacksmith and the tanner and the weaver and the spinner. And this was part of the local economy. Through the industrial economy, all of these things got so big that they became anti-neighbor friendly, and so we created zoning laws and restrictions to say, well, they're going to be over there in that industrial park, and suddenly we excluded from ourselves a brand new phoenix rising from the ashes of discarded local economies, as many of us appreciate the value of doing all of these ancient crafts in situ to bring those economies back to our places. And the result is that now the average American farmer is 60 years old. And in the next 15 years, 50% of America's agriculture equity is going to change hands. Think about that. In the next 15 years, 50% of America's agriculture equity is going to change hands. That has never happened to any civilization in peace. The only time that level of landscape change in ownership has happened is in conquest, historically. We are in interesting times, and we have to unfetter local economies to do neighbor-scaled arts and crafts, and these local economies that were the foundation of our structure many, many years ago. Recognizing that a lot of these crafts have been industrialized to a place where they're not very neighbor friendly. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about making some pot pies in our kitchen to sell to the neighbors. We're talking about fermenting some pickles. We're talking about making a couple 5-gallon buckets of bologna. Not an industrial site. Are you with me? And so the local food system is screaming for that. And every time that can't happen, it simply aids and abets this global fraternal agenda that is shoving us like a juggernaut right down the road. I am thrilled that there is a local food tsunami going on in our country. I'm very thrilled about that, okay? But we're still only arguably, 2%. We're still on a lunatic fringe. We haven't even gotten to the early adopter stage yet. Okay? But what's interesting is, even at 2 or 3%, the margins are so tiny and the industrial system is so fragile that the pushback is becoming dramatic from the industrial system. They want it all. They don't want any competition. And so a vote for local food and a sponsorship of local food is a way to create that kind of freedom. So I'm about done. What can we do? So what can you do? What can I do? What can we do about this? I got 3 things. Quickly. 1, discover your kitchen. Get in your kitchen. I'm not talking about, hearth cooking, hoop skirts, and washboards. Okay? As romantic as that may sound to somebody who's never done it. All right? Think about our kitchens. We got on-demand hot and cold water. We've got a refrigerator humming away. We've got a stove that we can just flick a dial. We don't have to get up at 4 o'clock and get in here and start this fire, and you just turn a dial and you got heat. Like that. Man, great-grandma would have given her eye teeth for that kind of thing. She had to get up and get down to the spring, and get the water and bring it back, put it in the cook stove, and then get the kindling and start it, Paul, you got that kindling out there? Got to get you some scrambled eggs in a couple hours if you can get that done. Folks, emancipate yourself from processed food. Okay? We don't need it. We don't need it. Okay? Our bodies don't want it, and we don't need it. You know, all of the food technology for the last 40 years has not gone into better nutrition, better taste, better quality. It's all gone into shelf life. And let me tell you, when all of your genetic selection for tomatoes is to make a tomato be able to ride for 1,500 miles in the back of a tractor trailer, have a cardboard tomato. And it's going to taste like cardboard. And kids are going to wonder, ooh, why do I want to eat this? Okay? So, get in your kitchen. Get jazzed about it. Number 2, go on a food treasure hunt in your community. Take your time and money that you're going to spend this year. This is hard right here, I know, but stay with me. The time and money that you would spend on recreation and entertainment, take 1 year and find your food treasures. Every community today has them. They're far more available today than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You know, when I started doing talks 20 years ago or whenever it was, you know, it was a lot of times hard, you know, to eat when I'd go. Now, there's always good local food available everywhere, okay? So turn off the TV, or better yet, take your deer rifle and shoot your TV, and go and take that time that you would, for 1 year. I'm only asking for 1 year. You see, you're not going to see this local food treasures, you're not going to see it on the front page of the newspapers. We're too small to buy a $4.5 million 30-second Super Bowl ad. You know, look, if you're buying food that you see advertised on the TV, you're in trouble, okay? So take it for 1 year, and you'll find this whole subculture, okay, of food treasure. Go on a food treasure hunt. And finally, number 3, grow something yourself. Now, it might not be anything more than an under kitchen sink vermicomposting bin. You know, you can get little vermicomposting bins. You can put all your kitchen scraps in earthworms, and they'll, turn it into wonderful castings. Okay. If you've got a patio, you can put a hanging garden. I mean, there's so you go to a Mother Earth News Fair, my goodness, there's every kind of hanging PVC little, things. You don't need a lot of land to do this. I read about a guy in Kenya. He went down to the landfill and he got a bunch of 18-inch culverts. He popped holes in them, cut them 12 feet tall and set them up. He only had like an acre, and he set these things up, packed them full of compost, put drip irrigation in them, and he planted 12 acres worth of cabbages in the sides of these vertical tubes standing up on his half acre of land. That's pretty cool. Okay? So do something yourself, participate, get a visceral connection. Maybe it's beehives on the roof, it's something, okay? But learn the majesty and the awe of it. I'm such a big believer in children's gardens. I'll tell you what, when we talk about self-actualization for children, I can tell you it does a lot more for the self-actualization of a 6-year-old to be able to plant a seed, grow a tomato, and harvest that tomato up to where the juice runs down her elbow. That does something to the psyche of a person that's far superior to being the top points getter in Angry Birds. And so just participating in the awe and the majesty, realizing, wow, this is a bigger deal than me. It's a great big, that's good. It's good to come to adulthood humble. That's a good thing. Rather than with hubris and thinking I got the world by the tail and all I got to do is manipulate some buttons and a cyber screen here, and man, I can just make this thing go hotter or colder or faster or slower, or I got this world by the tail. We don't have this world by the tail. This world has us by the tail. And the sooner we recognize that and begin to viscerally participate in the majesty and the awesomeness of this great earth, the better off we'll be and the better legacy we'll leave to our children, one bite at a time. Ultimately, what we see on our plate is a picture of the landscape we're leaving for our grandchildren. And connecting those dots is a powerful, empowering, participatory lesson that each of us has the blessing to be a part of. We don't have to sit on the bleachers. We don't have to sit and blame everybody else and say, why didn't everybody else? No. We can participate today. Where we are today is a result of billions and billions of little decisions that have been made by our forebears. Where we will be in 50 years will be the culmination of the billions and billions of little decisions that we make between now and then. And so, you and I, cumulatively, we move the needle by the way we purchase, buy, and decide to live. And so, if we commit ourselves to that, we will be able to participate and be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And that is a cool way to live. Are we up for it? Yes. All right. Good. Let's do it. Thank you. We've got about 10 minutes for questions, and I'm glad, don't be bashful. I will repeat the question so everybody can hear it, and then we will promptly leave at a hill. Is that okay? Who's in charge? Jason? Is that good? Okay. Then we'll do the book signing, and you can leave, or you can throw tomatoes or whatever you want to do. So let's have 10 minutes of questions very quickly. Yes?
What can we do to get our government out of the way?
Oh, what can we do to get our government out of the way of this? First of all, there is nothing as powerful as patronizing aggressively. I don't mean buying little, purple ribboned Gerber jars of jam at the farmer's market and saying, I participated in the local food system, aren't I great, I'm talking about buying a bushel of green beans and going home and canning those green beans and creating your larder. Right now, this 21,000 member valley, a person valley, at an average cost of about $3,000 a person, which is about the per capita expenditure on food, $63 million. Okay? If you just, right now, arguably, local food accounts for, depending on who you read after, 1 to 5%. Probably today I heard different numbers, but for sake of discussion, we'll say 2%, okay, of food purchases. What if we move that needle to 50%? Just 50%, okay? That would be $30 million. How many farms would that support? How many farmers would that support? Okay? And you talk about a vote. That would get the attention of every policymaker. In fact, if you did that, you would make front page of the New York Times because the whole world would come here to see what in the world's happening in Ketchum. Okay? And you're not the first community I told this to. All right. But nobody else done it either, But that, yes, there is policy stuff that can be done. Join the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. That is probably doing more to come along farmers like us and help us. They're doing herd share arrangements. They're doing non-commerce buying club arrangements to where we can get food out of commerce. Very clever, finding guerrilla marketing loopholes in the system. The fact is, we're going to have to be guerrillas in this. We're not going to change it from the top down. No innovation happens from the top down. You're not going to get Congress to change anything. What happens is, from the bottom up and the grassroots, we create movement, and the movement moves up into the society, not from the top down. The top down, they're all circling the wagons trying to demonize, marginalize, criminalize what we try to do, and tell the world, that a compost pile is, since there's sex going on a compost pile, that's a lot dirtier than a chemical 10-10-10, or a manure lagoon, Well, amazingly, I've never seen anybody attacked or poisoned or drowned in a compost pile. So, patronize it, okay? Get aggressive about it. Next question. Other question? Yes?
I was on your question and answer earlier this morning. I'm an agricultural business leader at CSI, and I'm working on water research management. My question is, I live in Bloomsbury, Idaho, which is about an hour and a half, out into the desert away from here. And kind of the local food movement hasn't really reached Bloomsbury like it has this community. And my question is, what can I do that would impact them on a bigger scale? How can I convince them that this is something that's important?
Yeah, the question is, what's the community? Gloom something? What is it? No, I was having trouble hearing. What's the name of it? Glensbury. All right, not Gloomsbury. All right. Glens Ferry. Glens Ferry, we got that. Okay, Glens Ferry. All right. All right. So they're dragging their heels. What can I do? What can you do to move that needle forward? Well, I'm a big believer in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that is that we have to focus our energies in moving whatever needle is the passion of our heart, to move it within he calls it the sphere of influence. And all of us can get all riled up and ulcers and excited about things that are beyond our sphere of influence, okay? And so you have to define that for yourself. Where is your sphere of influence? And once you peg where your sphere of influence is, then you begin working in that area. If it's a producer, then you can cut off an acre and start doing something different. Okay, if you're not a producer, you can set your sight on, 1 dinner a week is going to be from scratch from local sources. Maybe that's all I can do right now. Okay, but you start within your sphere of influence and stay there and don't get consternated about stuff that's outside that, because that will bleed your emotional and physical energy off. Worrying about all those things that you can't do anything about. I mean, the average farm conference, you go to a farm conference, the average farm conference is farmers get together for 2 days and spend 98% of their time talking about things they can't do anything about. And so, stay with what you can do something about. And, that's a vague answer, but I can't begin to, I know what I would do if I were in your shoes, but I have a different skill set, interest set, sphere of influence. Okay? Good. Time for a couple more questions. Anything else? Yes.
So, personally, I'd like to thank the PICO Foundation again for putting this on, because these things don't just my question to you is, in all of your travels, you've obviously been doing this a long time. Is there a community that you're familiar with that has gone down the path that you're describing far enough to create an example that maybe the Wood River Valley should consider modeling itself after?
Is there a country somewhere that's gone down this path far enough to create a model of that we can model this after? I don't know of one. There are, there are certainly places where things are going on. Okay, Eastern North Carolina, there's a lot of really good stuff. Of course, the Bay Area of San Francisco, there's a lot of really good stuff going on there. The Minneapolis area is a hotbed of stuff. Hudson Basin in New York is seeing a lot of great stuff going on. But all of these places are still, they're much more populated, obviously, than here. But all of them are, they're still under 5%. It's still very, very infantile. And I can tell you, having been to all these places, every one of them is wrestling with the very things that I'm talking about tonight. And so it's, we haven't gotten here overnight. We won't get out of here overnight. But momentum creates momentum. And in Virginia, Sedgwick, Maine is probably as far along as anybody in the country. If you Google Sedgwick, Maine, you can see their half-page food sovereignty law, which is, of course, being challenged by the state, challenged by the Fed. It's illegal for you to have food sovereignty. Basically, it's a half-page law that says if you and I want to do business together in food as a producer or producer, buyer, whichever foot's on the right one, that it's none of the government's business. Within the town, within the village of Sedgwick. That's been duplicated now about 7 times in other areas around the country, 3 or 4 of them in Maine. And of course, the feds are coming and challenging it, saying, you can't do that because it nullifies federal oversight of food. Sedgwick says, go take a hike. So they're in court, and it's being litigated, and it'll be a long, protracted deal. I mean, the fact that a community can be told that they don't have a sovereignty in being able to determine who can and cannot buy and trade is just obscene, in my opinion. But, and this is one of the reasons why I'm for very limited federal government, if I may. Yeah. I've got just enough time to squeeze this in, okay? So this will be the last question. This is why I'm such a big believer, because when we talk about localization, see, the thing is, we've got to understand the full spectrum of what localization thinking means. You can't have a local food system and vote for somebody that wants to expand the federal government. That's called intellectual schizophrenia. And the reason that our founders wanted an external government and states' rights was because they wanted a germination tray of innovation. Just imagine right now if the federal government, I'll just take an example, did not take had anything to do with education. Education is completely up to the states. So we have one state that says education is free all the way through college. And we're going to tax accordingly. One state says we don't believe education is part of the responsibilities of government. There's not going to be any public education. Another state says, well, we think education is an important part of a government, but we're going to let everybody decide where to send their kids, so all we're going to do is give every child, well, the parents of the child, a $7,000 education voucher per year, and they can spend it anywhere they want to. Catholic schools, private schools, atheist schools, whatever, okay? All right, now those are just 3, and I could go on and on and on. You could have Montessori, you could have all. The point I'm making is, wouldn't it be amazing if we could sit here and study 50 different ideas? But when you arrogate to the central power the protocol, the model, it stifles, indeed criminalizes, innovation in the system, and so innovation can't ever come up because it's a one-size-fits-all. All the winnings go to one deal. There's a new permaculture book out, and the greatest phrase in that book is, it says that in times of epochal change, the most important thing to preserve in a society is dissensus. Because it is out of dissensus that innovation percolates, all these different ideas and ways of thinking. It's when you demand consensus. Can't we all get together? That stifles the minority view and the heretic fringe and the lunatic fringe and those troublesome innovators. The Romans had an axiom that you could tell the strength and vitality of a culture by how many laws it had. The more laws, the more fragile a culture. If a society is strong and virile and not fearing anything, who cares about the drink raw milk? Let them drink it. If they die, they die. Who cares? Who don't want to educate their kids, and they're going to raise a bunch of, okay, those homeschoolers. I mean, we grew up, homeschooling 30 years ago with our kids. We homeschooled and we had to close the curtains. We didn't ask, we didn't tell, we didn't ask permission. It was one of these, because you had truant officers coming to take your kids out of your home for such aberrant behavior as homeschooling. Just like today, we have people saying, well, if we let people have a choice on their food, why people die, we won't be able to build enough hospitals for. But the problem is, a locality can't do this. Wouldn't it be cool if a locality could say, you know what? We're going to take the chains off and we're going to say, anybody in our community that wants to make a quiche, bologna, cheese, if you got 2 consenting adults and a voluntary buyer, have at it. The problem is, see, I believe that would actually unleash an incredibly localized, safe, accountable, transparent food system. In fact, it might even empty out the hospital. But we can't try it because the federal comes in with guns and marshals and litigators and everybody else saying, no, you can't have that freedom. All to protect your interests, of course. And that's why, if we're going to embrace a local food system with local transparency, autonomy, chains of custody, and the relational aspect of commerce, it is only philosophically consistent that we ask for legislators and leaders who also recognize that from the bottom up comes innovation and the solutions, the antidotes for today's problems, never from the top down. The top is too busy protecting its entrenched status quo and its market, profiles and all that. Innovation percolates from the bottom, and it's in preserving that we actually create antidotes, true lasting antidotes, not Band-Aid cures, but true antidotes for today's issues. May all of your carrots grow long and straight.